Tales from College, Episode 2. Back in the day. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Most people, most blokes would think you're in a class, an enrolment with 42 other women and you're the only bloke. It doesn't get any better than that. But these were not normal women. Far from it. And so, it is my duty to inform you of what I experienced while studying for diplomas in the humanities. You would think that people who wanted to be social workers, counsellors, and helping people and having empathy would be the characteristics of these women. They wanted to be psychiatrists and psychologists. And so I am going to describe the personalities of my fellow students and friends. Very soon, as what happens in group behaviour, you become institutionalised and you start sitting in the same seat, acting in similar ways and grouping up with people who you think you might be able to connect with. And after a short while I realised there was 4 main factions, some hangers-on and the like, and different fragments, but there was 4 main factions, I would say. And so when the 42 people were milling about, standing around, going from class to class, factions were forming. So in my mind, I nominated these people with a title, and that was the A team, the B team, the C team, and the D team. I took it upon myself to become a member of the A team. And in movies and the like, we probably have heard of flashbacks where the person who's the protagonist suddenly gets a flashback to something, and the viewer or even reader, if it's a book, gets informed of the reason why they're behaving in a certain way, because you get a flash of their memory, known as a flashback, popular technique in the movies in particular. In writing you get flashbacks. Occasionally in very good writing you get future flashes. Something I introduce into my writing quite a lot, a future flash. And what this does is it informs you of an outcome or something which you wouldn't know would be the case, and it affects the present, but you're getting a glimpse of the future. So I'll do a little bit of a future flash. It's not dramatic, but when I decided I would have to be a member of the A team for my own self-esteem, I'm not someone who wants to be the centre of attention, so therefore I wondered how to do this and be comfortable. But by the middle of the course in the first year, they had to nominate a class spokesperson, someone who represented the whole class when it came to important things about funding, course, style, and you speak with the lecturers in a kind of formal type of way, and someone had to be nominated. So I get nominated as a person to do that job, but I didn't want to do it. It wasn't really my type of personality, so I refused to do it. So Jean, this woman, she saw it as a prestigious position, so she took on board the being the class spokesperson. And one of our main motives here was also so that I didn't get that position, because she was always saying that the lecturers favoured me in my marks and all sorts of things like that. Now, Jean was 50 years old and separated from her husband, who worked out in the rigs, and I think he did a runner, and got another model which was younger than Jean, and this clearly made her annoyed. She was a big woman, big boned, and had a really deep voice, deeper than mine. And she had a 1970 style, a 1975 style. If you looked at a situation comedy or a program or anything, a general type of program about soap opera, whatever, from in mid-70s, you'd see someone very much like Jean, and she'd maintained this image. At the time, 30 years on, she still looked the same, that old style, 70s, and she had very big hair, and because she was a big woman with a big, heavy-set head, her head looked giant because her hair was really big and her glasses were really big. So you got the impression this woman was a giant. She had a very deep voice, and people were terrified of her. And she had nice features, so I could imagine when she was a younger woman, she would have been pretty, and she still had a nice smile, even as a 50-year-old. So when she did smile, her face was actually quite pleasant. But I think that was because I was usually away at the other side of the class, essentially as far away as possible from her. And when I looked over, and sometimes the lecturer might say something mildly amusing, she would smile, and I thought she actually looks quite pretty. But I think that's because I couldn't afford a prescription for my glasses, so I couldn't see very much anyway. So I saw a fuzzy kind of image at the other side of the class. So she did look quite pretty, but she also had a fierce side to her and a fierce look, and her personality was confrontational. She was a woman that tackled the world, and she was loud and verbalised her thoughts. So she didn't think in her head, she thought out loud and would announce toilet breaks. I think I'm going to go for a pee. And off she went. This is the kind of woman she was, and she wanted to be a counsellor, and she wanted to be a clinical psychologist. And of course, I didn't want to die too soon, so I felt like saying, I think you need a counsellor. or a clinical psychologist, but I said that in my mind. Careful not to say it aloud because that would have been certain death. Jean was a whinger, a moaner, and she would fight, often with people in the corridor. As we're heading to the next class, she would be hobbling along, very deliberate, walking along a corridor, and some pretty young thing, very lightweight, would be walking along, trying to breeze past you. What? And she started getting an argument with people who were just walking past because she felt that was an insult, that they were like trying to overtake her. What are you doing? So, often I thought she would perhaps just explode, because there seemed to be an awful lot of tension inside her, and she was convinced there was a lecturer who was manly and good looking, great moustache. He looked a bit like that guy Shoestring from that old programme, Trevor Reeve I think it is, and she was convinced that this lecturer was there because he was identical to her husband, who she was separated from, and she thought that this guy lecturer pretty much was a sort of her husband, but there to keep her in the line. And so when I did my final project, here's a future flash, a few years later, I was assessing perception of intelligence, not actual intelligence, perception of intelligence, and I gave Jean my questionnaire, and she rated herself at 120 as her IQ, and I would say her IQ was probably about 100 average, but she rated herself at 120, and so let's assess the women. Intelligence level, I would say average. Personality, likability, approachability, I would say out of 10, 5. She had some nice features, but very short fuse. In terms of physical attractiveness, passionate type, that type of thing, I would say about 7 or 8. She had something about her, but it was quite hard to find at times. Maybe you needed to be a forensic scientist. So that was one of my colleagues, and I'm going to go through the other ones as well. So this is that's that one for you.